On the first floor of the building where the law office was located, the entrance door slammed. A distinguished man of about 30 years entered the office. He was wearing a brown suit made of expensive cloth. Moreover, his manners revealed his high social standing. He walked slowly down the corridor, carefully reading the names displayed on the massive, expensive doors. Finally, his short journey through the office ended at a door with the inscription Jorge Gonzalez, family and civil law attorney. "Sir, what is your business here?" a pretty secretary addressed him. Her workplace was situated almost at the entrance to the lawyer's office. "Oh, I didn't notice you at first." "Good afternoon, miss," the stranger responded politely. "It's all right. I'm rarely noticed, since everyone comes here directly to see Senor Jorge, the famous attorney. Yes, he is a renowned lawyer who has never lost a case." "You're right. Credit must be given to his talent. Do you have an appointment?" The girl began to switch to a more businesslike tone. "Yes, Senor Jorge should be expecting me." "One moment." Adriana, the secretary, entered the office to check. "You may go in. He's expecting you," she said when she came back out. "Thank you," said the polite senor as he disappeared into the lawyer's office. The first thing he noticed was the numerous diplomas and certificates that literally covered the entire wall. This inspired confidence that he had come to the right place. "Come in, I've been expecting you," the lawyer offered the man a seat opposite him in a green leather chair. He also looked very distinguished, dressed in a white shirt, tie, and business suit. Such an appearance demonstrated respect for clients and set a businesslike tone for the conversation. "Thank you. I'm ready to hear you out." After these words, Rodriguez, the distinguished gentleman's name, began to tell his family story. It was painfully banal. A middle-aged widower married a young beauty in an attempt to regain his youth and feel happy again. Unfortunately, the young lady had completely different goals, deciding, as often happens in such situations, to live the high life at someone else's expense. Having obtained neither the first nor the second, Rodriguez decided to break the marriage. However, these intentions did not align with his wife's interests. She had no intention of divorcing, so the argument "didn't find happiness" was unlikely to be a convincing argument for the court. That's why he was here. "Senor Rodriguez, I'm afraid I have to disappoint you, but I handle about 50 such cases a year. So your situation is not as hopeless as you say." "So, there's a chance?" "There must be one. Considering that in such cases, the court is always on the side of the disappointed spouse. The main thing is to present it correctly. And believe me, there's no one better at that than me." "I very much hope so," said the visitor, who noticeably perked up. When the discussion of the details was over, the senor left the office, and the maestro himself followed him out. "Adriana, make me a black coffee. These banal family squabbles tire me. I want something special, something thrilling." "Yes, it's hard to surprise you." Jorge nodded affirmatively and returned to his office. Adriana decided to take advantage of the situation and call her latest admirer. It's worth noting, she was immensely popular with men. Slim, with a model-like appearance, always in high heels, she drew attention. Her expressive, wide-open eyes and dazzling smile, which she bestowed on everyone without exception, even intrigued the most confirmed bachelor. And her office attire only added to her charm, making her even more attractive. "Guillermo, darling, hi. I miss you so much. These endless visitors exhaust me," she drawled into the phone, as mannered girls often do. "I want to relax. I hope you can help me with that." Judging by her expression during the conversation, the answer was satisfactory, and a pleasant evening awaited her. "You can't imagine how much I love this place." Adriana looked at her companion with a loving gaze, causing him to straighten with pleasure. They stood at the entrance to a restaurant she loved to visit. "Sweetheart, you know I'm willing to do anything for you, just to make you happy." After these words, the young couple entered and found themselves in a hall. It was styled in retro fashion. Low ceilings, white wall sconces, and small sofas created an intimate atmosphere. This was one of the best churrascarias in the city, where one could eat a variety of meats. Waiters brought different dishes directly to the table, and guests only had to choose something to their liking. For men, this was a real paradise where they could enjoy a juicy steak or churrasco. Adriana also belonged to the group of meat delicacy lovers, so she expected to get only the most pleasant impressions from the evening. They settled on a cozy sofa and began to choose dishes. A young waiter brought them various meat options, and they chose churrasco. "How did you know I love meat?" the girl asked her companion. "It wasn't hard. I just looked at your social media page." "Oh, you rascal. Now you know everything about me," Adriana wagged her beautiful finger at him. "We've been together for 6 months, and all I know about you is your name and where you work," Guillermo replied. The young man was good-looking. Just as handsome as Adriana, tall, slender but fit, about 25 years old. He had shoulder-length dark hair and atypical blue eyes for this region. "I didn't think you were so curious." It was noticeable that Adriana didn't like the idea of him searching for information about her on social networks. "Sweetheart, are you hiding something from me?" "No, Guillermo, of course not. I just don't like it when people try to find out details of my personal life behind my back." Adriana softened a bit. "Let's just have dinner. I'm terribly hungry." The young couple stopped their dispute and indulged in a pleasant dinner. "Adriana, a very important visitor is coming to see me today. Please, do not leave your workstation," Jorge said as soon as he entered the office. It seemed this meeting was very important to him. "Of course, sir," the secretary replied politely. She always took her task seriously, but the lawyer decided to remind her once more. This was typical behavior for a boss who wants all his subordinates to follow orders without question, especially for someone as renowned as him. His impeccable reputation was at stake, and it couldn't be compromised under any circumstances. Around noon, the very person Jorge had been expecting entered the reception area. Outwardly, he was quite unremarkable. Just an ordinary middle-aged man of average height. Except for one detail, he never let go of his black briefcase. This was typical behavior for people who have something to hide. "Good day. You must be the person Senor Lawyer is expecting?" the young lady inquired. "How should I introduce you?" "There's no need to introduce me. I am expected," the visitor replied rudely. Adriana stopped her questions and hurried to inform Jorge that the person he had been waiting for all morning had finally arrived. "Invite him in quickly." "No need for formalities," the lawyer said nervously. He rarely got this agitated. Usually, he was quite calm when receiving clients. His many years of experience and typical legal cases no longer excited him. But his desire to prove himself remained, so he showed an open interest in cases that could enhance his professional status. Or at least prove once again that he was unmatched among defenders of the law. This was just such a case. "Please, come in, sir." Jorge didn't know his name, so he intentionally paused and looked at the man hopefully, expecting him to say it. "There's no need for you to know my name. It's enough that I am entrusting you with the details of my case," the stranger replied calmly. The lawyer's status didn't allow him to pay much attention to such formalities, especially since it was the client's wish. "Then let's get straight to business," he said businesslike. "May I sit down?" The man was still standing at the entrance, as the question about his name had unsettled both him and the lawyer. "Yes, of course. Forgive me for not offering you a seat earlier." The lawyer courteously pointed to a comfortable chair suitable for conversation. "Coffee, juice, or perhaps something stronger?" he kindly offered. "No, nothing. I have little time. Let's get straight to the point." The man tried to steer the lawyer's courteous tone towards business. "As you wish." Jorge sat in his working chair and looked attentively at his client. Suddenly there was a knock on the door, and Adriana entered without waiting for a response. "Senor Jorge, I need to leave urgently." If this had been an ordinary client and an ordinary case, the boss might have shouted, reminding her of her duties. But this was an unusual case, and Jorge was least inclined to show his negative sides now. "Okay, Adriana. You can be free for the day." The southern sun unusually dazzled the girl as she left the office. She usually stayed late, and it was rare for her to enjoy the city's atmosphere. And there was much to be surprised about. The city enchanted with its beauty. The dynamic pace of life blended with the old 19th century architectural buildings. It was easy for a passerby to move from a noisy street to a narrow alley in the historic part of the city and in minutes find themselves in a completely different atmosphere of quiet, measured life. The natives of the city, mostly of middle income, lived here. They greeted warmly anyone who unexpectedly wandered into this quiet area. Here, one could not only escape the city's hustle and bustle but also visit an antique shop and buy some local souvenirs. And then return to some fashionable part of the city to visit the famous opera or attend a concert by a popular artist. Yes, there was much to be surprised about. It was on one of these noisy streets that the young girl found herself. And it seemed not by accident. Her focused look indicated she had some very important business. Meanwhile, the conversation between the two important men continued in the office. "Lawyer Jorge, I have a very unusual case. I would even say that you have never encountered anything like this in your legal practice," said the stranger. This intrigued Jorge even more, and he listened to his client more attentively. "I will not hide from you, I am directly connected to the criminal world. A very authoritative one. But now I need protection myself. I warn you right away, this is not safe. If anyone from my circle finds out that I am here, both you and I will be in serious trouble." The interlocutor's voice grew quieter, almost to a whisper. "Yes, but what exactly is my task? From what or from whom should I protect you?" "Don Carlos. Have you ever heard this name?" "Oh, yes. I think few haven't heard of this villain. Half the city is under his control. I want you to protect me from him right in the courtroom. Then he will not dare threaten me anymore, let alone take any actions against me. I will be protected by the law. Yes, you have given me a challenge. To protect one criminal from another. But I am not used to backing down. Since I have gotten involved in this dark story, I will see it through to the end. Deal, my friend." It was clear that Jorge was already excited, so his last words fully reflected his inner state. Meanwhile, on one of the noisy streets, another meeting was taking place, equally secretive and perhaps just as intriguing. In the bustling place St. John, among the crowds, Adriana and a stranger could be seen. It wasn't Guillermo. But the meeting was far from romantic. They were discussing something seriously, as evidenced by their tense faces. "Are you sure this is indisputable evidence and it can be presented in court?" "No doubt," the stranger said. "There are plenty of witnesses who will gladly help you." It was clear from Adriana's face that she was satisfied with the answer. Then both melted into the crowd, each going their separate ways. "You seem tense today. Did something happen?" Guillermo looked at Adriana questioningly. "No, everything's fine. It was just a tough day, lots of visitors, tons of paperwork." The girl gave the most banal answer to the question she was asked. "I don't like how you've been lately." "You don't smile at all, you ignore my attention," the young man persisted. "It's just your imagination. Let's go dancing somewhere." Adriana suddenly cheered up and started performing salsa moves right on the street. Guillermo was pleased that his beloved had finally brightened up, and he gladly supported her idea. "I'll need you today, Adriana." This phrase replaced the usual morning greeting from her boss. He was the same as usual, but something in his behavior had changed. The secretary immediately noticed it. "As you say, sir," the secretary replied without objection. "Come to my office. We need to discuss some details," Jorge continued businesslike. Before getting down to business, the lawyer suggested having a cup of coffee. He wanted to set the tone for the conversation. "Where did you learn to make such delicious coffee?" "I'm always amazed by your talents." Jorge tried to set a positive tone for their conversation. I make it for you every day, and only now have you appreciated its taste, sir. To think I drank such wonderful coffee every day and never noticed its flavor. I am truly absorbed in my work. That's hard to argue with, Adriana smiled. Do you remember the gentleman with the briefcase from yesterday? Jorge began transitioning to the main topic of their conversation. Of course, I remember. I need your help. But this is a very delicate matter. Can I count on you? Don't doubt it. Have I ever let you down? All the documents are always ready on time. You've never had any complaints about them. And only we know about your clients. Yes, that's true. You're a good worker. And you've never been known to gossip. Well, let's get started. He then detailed his conversation with the stranger from the previous day. He wanted to involve Adriana to find out everything about this gentleman. In this situation, he needed to worry about his safety first, and then his reputation. After much deliberation, he decided to rely on his secretary. He couldn't involve other lawyers from his firm due to professional ethics. So, he had very few options. Adriana, you're a very social person, and surely through your connections, you can find out everything about this man, the boss said at the end of the conversation. The girl was still processing everything she had heard, so she couldn't immediately give a definite answer to the question. I'll do my best, sir. I'll do everything I can. I'm counting on you. My reputation is in your hands. That's for sure. Then they both plunged into the routine tasks they handled daily, receiving visitors, filling out reports, preparing documents for court cases, and much more. Through her channels, Adriana had no trouble finding out the name of this mysterious gentleman. His name was Victor Jairi. He had immigrated to Latin America from Europe. He was involved in smuggling, drug trafficking, and many other illegal activities on his home continent. And Don Carlos, from whom he sought protection, was trying to take control of his criminal business. Adriana reported all this to her boss. So, by taking the stranger under his wing, Jorge was taking a big risk. He was even more at risk by deciding to be his legal defender in court. But the desire for self-affirmation, pragmatism, and persistence prevented him from deviating from his goal. After learning more detailed and truthful information about his client, Jorge began developing a sound defense strategy. Adriana actively helped him with this. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. The courtroom had a very strict interior, which further emphasized the importance of the events taking place there. Everything was done in brown tones. In the center of the room was a massive table where the judge and his assistants usually sat. To the right and left were the places for the prosecutor and the defense attorney. Along the side wall was the jury box. Opposite the judge were seats for witnesses and spectators so they could see everything happening in the courtroom. There were especially many spectators that day. Everyone was eager to see how the two criminal authorities would clash and what the outcome of this battle would be. The prosecution, represented by Don Carlos and his numerous entourage, was a formidable company. Don Carlos stood out among everyone with his imposing appearance. He was unflappable. His face expressed calm and confidence in a favorable outcome. His gray hair and neatly trimmed beard made him even more unapproachable. He sat surrounded by his lawyers, who were well prepared for today's trial. Numerous witnesses, irrefutable facts, and evidence, they had been gathering all this for several months. So, they appeared as confident as their boss. On the other hand, Victor's defense consisted of only one person, which at first glance made his position seem very unstable compared to the opposite side. But that was only at first glance. Jorge Gonzalez himself shone like a polished medallion. He had found something that only he knew about. He hadn't even shared his courtroom strategy with Victor, as the latter still preferred to remain a stranger to him. Whose side would prevail, whose arguments would be more convincing, these questions were on the face of everyone present in the courtroom. All rise, court is in session. This phrase instantly brought order to the courtroom, and everyone fell silent. A man in a judge's robe entered. This was Judge Adriano, one of the most honest and incorruptible judges in the city. Don Carlos had tried to find ways to influence him, but he remained steadfast. So, Don Carlos had to assemble an entire team of lawyers to ensure his victory in this high-profile case. Don Carlos, you accuse Mr. Victor Jairi of creating obstacles for your business. Did I state your position correctly? The judge addressed the gray-haired man. Yes, Your Honor. That's correct. This man is engaged in illegal economic activities, namely smuggling, which creates problems for honest and law-abiding citizens like myself. After these words, the courtroom noticeably stirred. Everyone knew what a law-abiding citizen Carlos was. His record included hostile takeovers, disappearances of people, arms trafficking, and much more that could land him in jail for life. Sir, do you agree with the charges against you? The judge addressed the stranger. No, Your Honor. And I intend to defend my innocence, the European said confidently. I declare the trial open. These words marked the start of the trial and set the clock ticking, determining the fate of each side. First, the numerous team of prosecutors presented evidence that Victor was involved in smuggling. It seemed these facts would be indisputable and the case was just a step away from a guilty verdict. But the most interesting part was yet to come. We would like to call a witness whose testimony can be added to the case. It was now the turn for Attorney Gonzalez to speak. After these words, an elderly woman entered the hall, escorted by two people. It was evident that she was very old. Your Honor, my name is Lucia. I am very old and have nothing left to lose. I am completely alone in this world. This man, Don Carlos, took away my family, my only son, and my husband. What does this have to do with our case? One of the prosecutors interjected. Objection overruled. Please continue, Senora, said the judge. Thank you, Your Honor. My son owned a small business providing tourist services. We live in a southern city, so he had no shortage of clients, and the business was doing well. Until this man intervened, she pointed at Carlos as she spoke. It was clear he was getting nervous. The confidence he displayed at the beginning of the session was vanishing. He took over the business through a hostile takeover and got rid of my son to ensure he wouldn't be a bother. My husband tried to uncover the circumstances, but was threatened with the same fate. Now my husband is gone. He died after another heart attack, which he suffered while trying to find out where our son was. So I have no one left to lose, and that's why I'm here. Those are just words, nothing more. The prosecutors tried to downplay the growing tension. No longer. I have an entire audio archive containing numerous threats against my son and husband. I couldn't take the risk while my husband was alive. Please submit it as evidence, the judge said. The large entourage and Don Carlos himself noticeably wilted after this statement. They expected another blow from the defense. And rightly so. Following this elderly woman, more witnesses came forward, providing further evidence of his guilt. Finally, it was time for the triumph of the maestro himself, Senor Jorge Gonzalez. His speeches were always not only convincing but also eloquent. Everyone was eagerly anticipating this moment. And once again, he did not disappoint. Honorable court, esteemed gentlemen. Today, I stand before you as the defender of my client, who is accused of a serious crime. My goal here is not just to prove his innocence, but to shed light on all the circumstances that led him to such a life. My client is not just a person with a name and surname, he is a person with his own story, feelings, and aspirations. He does not deserve to be judged solely based on the presented evidence. I ask you not to judge him by his appearance or the limited information provided by the prosecution. Look deeper, pay attention to the context and circumstances that may have influenced his actions. As you know, my client is from Europe. But what brought him to our continent? What forced him to leave his homeland, his family, and friends? Circumstances, you say. And you would be right. His elderly mother is forced to beg for alms at the church doors every day. In any weather, in rain and heat, she kneels, begging passers-by to help her sick granddaughter. and his wife dedicates every minute, every second of her time to their 5-year-old daughter, who is terminally ill. This is my client's daughter, who wants to live. And he, as a loving father, as a person ready to give everything for his loved one, is trying to save her fragile life here, on another continent. You can send him to prison. But along with him, you will deprive an entire family of the right to live. The daughter will die, followed by her mother and grandmother, who will lose any sense of purpose in life. Again, my task is not to justify the crime, but to provide a complete picture of the events and an opportunity for a fair decision. I hope your voice will be the voice of honor and reason, not of bias and prejudice. Thank you for your attention. After these words, the hall stood and erupted in applause. They were very prolonged, but no one attempted to interrupt them. A stranger looked at Jorge in bewilderment. He couldn't understand where Jorge got this information and how he masterfully depicted the tragedy of the real situation. Yes, he was a true maestro, whom he was fortunate to encounter. All rise, the court is in session, the court secretary announced the concluding phase. Judge Adriano entered the hall and opened the folder to read the verdict. Based on the presented evidence and witness testimonies, the court has decided to acquit Victor Jair and to initiate a criminal case against Don Carlos and commence an investigation. The hall gasped, both from the acquittal and the fact that a criminal case was finally initiated against Carlos. Perhaps this would put an end to his years of unpunished crimes. Or at least some of them. Victor embraced his savior, who beamed with satisfaction. Here was another triumph he had long awaited. Jorge barely had time to recover when numerous reporters rushed to him, demanding comments on the situation. The lawyer took great pleasure in talking about his achievements. He complimented his speeches with expressive gestures to add significance to the case. The hall was in no hurry to disperse. Carlos and his large entourage were in a state of confusion. They had not expected such an outcome. To bring an accusation and end up on the defendant's bench themselves, that wouldn't even happen in a nightmare. However, the trial had come to an end, and it concluded just as Jorge Gonzalez had planned. This triumphant event was to culminate in a celebration in honor of the victor. Gentlemen, I have gathered you here today in this wonderful place to mark an important milestone in my professional career, Jorge said, holding a glass of wine in his hand. The venue for the party was chosen as one of the most prestigious, befitting the significance of the occasion. The modern interior, which included the use of natural materials and elegant furniture, was appreciated by all present. The open layout, creating a comfortable atmosphere, encouraged conversation and celebration. It seemed that Jorge had invited all the lawyers in town to join him in celebrating his professional success. It should be noted that his colleagues disliked him, precisely because of his popularity, which was a result of his won court cases. But this did not prevent them from attending the parties and expressing fake joy for their colleague. Jorge himself had let his emotions run free today. He drank one glass after another and had already started saying too much. Adriana, who had been his right-hand person recently, tried to stop him. "Who are you? What right do you have to limit me in any way? A mere secretary will tell me what to do? You should only open your mouth when I allow you." Jorge snapped his fingers loudly, as if calling a waiter. In reality, this gesture was directed at Adriana. All this time, she stood nearby, listening to his drunken speech. "Yes, I was forced to seek your help. But that means absolutely nothing. You were an ordinary secretary, and so you shall remain," he said almost in a whisper, not wanting to spread the fact of Adriana's help in this matter. "Why are you whispering, Senor Jorge? Let everyone know with whom you must share the laurels of victory," the girl said haughtily. "Shut up, fool. Gentlemen, did you enjoy the performance of the famous Jorge Gonzalez at the trial?" Adriana addressed everyone present in the hall. Everyone nodded approvingly, while Jorge seemed to tense up a bit. "Now I will give a speech that will please not only you but also the main figure of tonight's party. Senor Jorge, would you like to see my oratory skills? I will prove to you that not only you, But I can also captivate the audience. All this time she was staring at her boss, not taking her eyes off him. He was in a dazed state and waited silently. 17 years ago, I lost my father. He was killed. The reason was unknown to me, as I was a child and did not understand much. But I clearly realized then that I had lost a close person. The criminal was never found. But I vowed that I would grow up and definitely find the one who did it. And I kept my word. I found him. It is Senor Jorge Gonzalez, the famous lawyer of all time. With these words, she extended her hand towards Gonzalez, as if presenting him like a stage artist. After these words, everyone at the party seemed to freeze. A deafening silence hung over the hall. The girl's words sounded like a thunderclap on a clear day. Jorge Gonzalez, the same Gonzalez with an impeccable reputation, suddenly turned out to be the worst scoundrel. Everyone looked at him in complete bewilderment, not knowing how to react to what had happened. Jorge began to stare intently at Adriana, hoping to find the features of the person he had killed many years ago. Yes, she was the daughter of Jose, his friend and colleague, whom he had killed many years ago and then managed to escape punishment. And only now did he see those features in her. But why only now, in this tragic moment for his career? The answer is simple. He had erased that terrible episode and that person from his life and memories. The properties of human memory, nothing can be done. It tries to push out everything that makes us relive the tragic moments of our lives. Jorge remained silent. He had nothing to say in his defense, which was completely pointless. Gradually, he began to realize that he was falling into an abyss from which he would hardly be able to escape. This was the end. The end of his career, the end of his profession, and probably the end of his life. They both mentally returned to 17 years ago and tried to recreate the picture of those events. Adriana, my girl, where are you? Her father walked around the house and looked into all the closets. His daughter loved to hide from him and waited for her father to find her to joyfully throw herself into his arms. And although she was already 10 years old, she loved to pretend to be a child to be caressed by her parents once more. Her father, whose name was Jose, was not stingy with love. He spent a lot of time with his beloved Adriana, loved taking her to the beach, and gave her gifts. It was true love between a daughter and her father. Usually, fathers love daughters. And this was that very case. This weekend, I will take you to the zoo. There are funny monkeys there. They are as funny as you. Jose loved to joke with his little princess. That's what he called Adriana most often. Hooray! I will see my relatives. It turns out they live in the zoo. The girl picked up her father's joke. Just promise me that you will behave very well until the weekend. Senora Miguela complained that you get distracted during lessons. But Dad, arithmetic is such a boring science that I just can't sit still. Sometimes a person has to do things they don't really like. Remember these words. We can't do only what we like. But why, Dad? Why do we always have to adapt to someone? Because we live in a society. And if everyone does as they please, what will happen then? It will be very cool. Adriana ran around the house hoping her father would chase her. But that did not happen. The mischievous girl stopped. She realized that now she was having a very serious conversation. I understand you, Dad. I will try to improve. Please do. This was a very well-mannered family. The father worked at a law firm, and the mother, Angela, was an art historian and organized exhibitions. They had their own house on the outskirts of the city with many rooms and a huge garden full of greenery. The family had everything one could dream of. It seemed that this would continue indefinitely. But every fairy tale has an end. Darling, did you invite the Gonzalez family to dinner? Angela asked her husband. Yes, they promised to come. Very good. It's important to maintain good relations with your partners. Sometimes you help him, and sometimes he helps you, his wife said instructively. Why do you think I'm so short-sighted? I understand everything perfectly. Not always. Sometimes you get so immersed in work that you even forget about Adriana and me. What are you saying? How can I push my girls to the background? You are the most precious and valuable in my life. I love you very much. And we love you, Dad. Adriana and Angela hugged their beloved man from both sides. So, tonight at 7? Jose confirmed. Yes, that's right. I will cook feijoada and chocolate pudding. I hope they like it, Angela said and went to the kitchen to please the evening guests. Guests were frequent in their house. Jose maintained close ties with his colleagues. Angela also had a wide circle of friends. Numerous girlfriends loved to visit this hospitable home, where they were always well-fed and any conversation was supported. Dinner was all prepared, and Angela was starting to set the table. She spread a pristine white tablecloth and began arranging the place settings. As an art historian, she possessed impeccable aesthetic taste. "Mom, who is coming to visit us today?" Adriana asked. "The Gonzalezes." "Will they bring me a gift?" "Of course not." "Is it your birthday?" "Gifts are only given for special occasions, and today is just a regular dinner. So my evening will be the most boring ever. They don't have children, which means you will be having adult conversations that I don't understand," the girl said with regret. "You can spend time in your room and not listen to what the adults are talking about," her mother advised. The doorbell rang, and Angela hurried to the door to greet the guests. Jose was already home, reading the evening newspaper with interest. He quickly put it aside to welcome their friends. "Come in. We are happy to see you in our home," Angela said warmly and sincerely. Jorge and Maria Gonzalez, their good acquaintances, entered the house. They were a young couple. He was an aspiring lawyer, and she was a homemaker. Despite his age, Jorge was a knowledgeable and ambitious advocate. His wife Maria, on the other hand, was very gentle and fully dedicated herself to household chores, creating a cozy nest for their family. She also dreamed of having children. "Not until I get on my feet, no children. They are just a bunch of problems. Besides, I'll have less time for work," was her husband's firm and unyielding stance. Maria could only wait for the moment when her husband would finally reach the pinnacle of his career and agree to have children. Oh, how naive she was in her expectations. The young couple entered the house and settled in the living room. "Jorge, Maria, I am very glad to see you in my home," Jose came out to greet the guests. "What a beautiful house you have. Everything is done with taste and love," Maria remarked. The house was indeed very comfortable. Pastel tones, white furniture, and an abundance of light filled it with warmth and coziness. The walls were adorned with paintings by famous artists, showcasing various genres and styles of painting from at least the last 3 centuries. "Yes, the occupational hazard of my Angela," joked the host. "Please come to the table. Everything is ready." The table, like the house, was elegantly set. The dishes and their appetizing aromas were inviting. There were also vases with fresh flowers, emitting a pleasant fragrance. "Yes, you know how to impress," Jorge said. He had been quiet all this time. He wasn't as open and delicate as his wife. Interior details didn't interest him much. Moreover, his visit was not just a courtesy call. It was more of a professional interest. Jose was not just his colleague. He was an excellent lawyer, constantly in demand by clients. Jorge envied his success deeply and used any opportunity to learn from his professional experience. "And where is your lovely daughter?" Maria asked unexpectedly as they started dinner. "She is a bit shy around adults," Angela explained. "Adriana loves children, and if you had a daughter or son, she would be happily playing with them in the living room. Surely, you have such plans for the future." Maria remained silent, and Jorge tried to change the subject. "Jose, how is your client, the one who committed the double murder?" "We are still sorting out the circumstances. He is a good person, and he likely wouldn't have committed such a crime willingly. There are factors we can use to our advantage. Can someone who killed 2 people really escape justice? Angela asked. Not just can, but must if circumstances pushed him to do it, her husband clarified. No circumstances can justify a crime. Maria objected. Dear, you have no understanding of legal matters, so your objections are completely irrelevant here. Jorge immediately silenced his wife. Maria fell silent again. Gradually, the dinner conversation shifted to professional topics, just as Jorge had hoped. The women, not wanting to interfere, retreated to the living room. My husband spends a lot of time working, Maria said. Yes, it shows. Maria, why don't you want children? You are such a lovely young couple. It would bring you joy, Angela asked. Again, it's for professional reasons. First a career, then children. That's my husband's belief, her companion replied. A wrong life stance. Children should come first. They are our continuation, our future, what makes life worth living, Angela tried to argue. But Maria understood this perfectly well already. She just couldn't change anything. When the visit was over and the guests had left, Angela said to her husband, What a careerist Jorge is. Yes, an ambitious young man. He'll go far, Jose agreed with his wife. A few days later, the colleagues met again. Jorge, my friend, come in. Glad to see you, Jose invited his colleague into his office. He had come unannounced at the end of the workday, when the office was already empty. What brings you here so late? Did something happen? Jose looked questioningly at the unexpected guest. Yes, I have something to discuss with you. A professional matter. I'm listening attentively. Have a seat, Jose offered Jorge a chair. Jose, you are a well-established and very successful lawyer. And I'm just at the beginning of my professional career, the young man began. I have a request for you. Go ahead. If you need any help, I'd be happy to assist. No, not help. A favor. Give me the double murder case. If there are circumstances and a chance for an acquittal, I'll do everything to ensure a positive outcome for the client. Jorge switched to a demanding tone. My friend, you know there is such a thing as professional ethics. On what grounds can I transfer the case to you? It would undermine both my and your credibility in the legal community. I know. Then why suggest such a step? You don't understand. I need a high-profile case to get noticed, the late visitor insisted. Your career is just starting. You'll have your share of high-profile, sensational cases. Jose tried to steer the conversation back. But Jorge's face showed he was resolute. Who guarantees that I'll get such cases? And when? Wait a lifetime? This is a chance. No. That's my answer. At that moment, the enraged Jorge lunged at his colleague and tried to grab him by the throat. But the other man was stronger and managed to push him away. Jorge was relentless. Like a predator, he lunged at his victim again and once more, unsuccessfully. Realizing that he couldn't overpower him easily, he grabbed a heavy object from the table and, in desperation at his failure, tried to throw it against the wall. But he hit Jose instead. Completely by accident, with no intention of causing harm to his friend. Jose fell, and a trickle of blood flowed from his head. Jorge was stunned for a second, then ran to the fallen Jose. He wasn't breathing. Realizing that something terrible had happened, Jorge began to cover his tracks. He wiped down everything he could, even things he hadn't touched. Then he left the office, which was empty. The police never found anyone. It all happened in the evening, there were no witnesses. And the criminal himself destroyed all the evidence, leaving not a single clue. When Jose's family found out about it, especially Adriana, no one could believe it. Of course, defending criminals can put you in dangerous situations. But Jose was fair and only took on cases where the defendant was a victim of circumstances. Who could act so cruelly? To kill a lawyer in his own office. Adriana swore to herself that she would do everything to find the answer to this question. It turned out to be not so simple. Jorge soon moved to another city, leaving his wife. But Adriana found him. She got a job at his office and meticulously gathered evidence of his guilt. An unusual client actively helped her in this. He was from the criminal world and thus had connections with many influential figures. So, the career of a successful lawyer collapsed overnight, and Adriana finally managed to restore justice. After the incident, a criminal case was opened against Jorge, and offers of cooperation poured in for Adriana from various law firms. Of course, everyone wanted to secure someone who had solved a crime committed by Gonzalez himself. In legal circles, everyone knew that name. At that time, she didn't have a legal education. But the persistence with which she had sought the criminal for many years and collected evidence of his guilt easily helped her master the basics of legal work and become a decent lawyer. And now it was her name that distinguished gentlemen were seeking on the office doorplates as they wandered through the corridors of law firms. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.